my Brown Brave listeners, and welcome back to my podcast, Be Brown Brave. I'm Michelle Starr, a speaker, author, and transformational coach who have worked in corporate for over 25 years in leadership positions with Procter & Gamble and General Electric Supply Chain Management. I have a young adult son and a husband of 25 years, and I'm heavily involved in my community. I started my entrepreneurial journey as a consultant with my company, Be Brown Brave, where I advocate for workplace equity, which began in the midst of COVID-19 in 2020. I performed 2 TEDx talks, one in Colorado and one at Princeton City Schools. I authored a published book called Be Brown Brave, Guide to Supporting Women of All Color in the Workplace. I have an executive coaching certificate helping business leaders build revenue and skill empathy by capitalizing on their hidden values in the form of women of color. So listeners and viewers, because your time is valuable and limited, throughout my series, I promise to try to cover as many mindsets with varying beliefs from people who are of different races and genders and education levels and work levels. To speak on their work-related experiences relevant to women of color and share some of my thoughts on my mission for more leaders to practice the brave inclusion. Because as of today in America, according to Zippia.com and Rand.org, women hold 35% of senior level positions compared to men who hold 65%. And that is white men. As of today's data, women of color hold only 4% of those executive levels. And when I say women of color, I'm talking Indian, Asian, Latin, African, and sometimes even white. Their percentage levels are too low, and that poses a huge gap of missed opportunities for America's employment system. And it highlights the challenges and disparities in leadership. So I've decided to have each guest represent a difference in those identities and have them speak on their experiences so that many of you can understand that no matter our differences, we're all the same. And America is missing out when we treat each other differently. So let's dive into some thoughtful questions for this podcast interview where I've invited Maria Olaguera, a systems and software engineering professional, to speak. Listeners, I want you all to meet Maria. Hi, Maria.
Hi, Michelle.
How are you today?
Good. Yourself?
I am good. I'm glad you can join me. Maria, so I've shared with my listeners in my first episode the meaning of my Be Brown Brave mission, and that I will invite guests who will represent varying identities to speak on their workplace experiences. And I want to start by having the viewers learn who Maria is. So may I ask, what is your gender?
Female.
What is your race?
Filipino.
Your education level?
I have a bachelor's degree in computer science.
And your work level as of today?
I guess, professional engineer.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the sector?
In aerospace.
Aerospace, one of my favorites. So everyone, before she shares her workplace experiences, I want you all to know that I met Maria about 8 years ago at a parents group for our sons, and we're still a part of that group today. So let's get started. Maria, let's share why you or what motivated you to pursue a career in tech industry.
It's actually really interesting. I got there in a roundabout way when I was applying for programs in university. I was really interested actually in medicine, and that's what I had wanted to do. But then, I was thinking about how many years it takes to get a medical degree and weighing that against finances, as university is expensive, even in Canada at the time. And so I thought, if I couldn't risk maybe doing pre-med and not getting into med school, or just staying at school for an extended period of time.
Right.
And so what I did was I looked at the course calendar and looked at what jobs were viable. Like I was like, what programs will lead me to a job
faster
in 4 years?
Okay.
And so computer science was it. And at the time it was in the late 90s. It was kind of starting that boom. And I was like, you know what? I think I can do that.
So, okay, speaking of that, what can you share some of your experiences as a woman in the tech industry?
As a woman, then I didn't really think about it at the time, but I had a lot of male classmates, a lot of male professors. It was really not very common to have females. And so there were very few of us. I had very few female professors as well. So, and even going into the workforce, I mean, I was very used to being in a department of about, let's say 70 people, and there would only be two women.
Gosh, people, can you believe that? 2 women amongst 70 plus people?
Yes, yeah.
So what challenges did you encounter throughout your career when you were one of the few?
Yeah, well, I think there were I had always started in engineering. It's not like I went into engineering from a different field. So it was almost like I didn't know any different.
Yeah. Same here.
Right?
Same here. It's like you were already, it's like being in a family. When a family of all brothers and you're the only sister, you don't see yourself as the oddball out because you're just so used to it. But then when somebody make you aware of it and bring it to your attention, you're like, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Yes, exactly.
So
and,
can you think of some challenges that you've experienced being one of the only few?
I think, sometimes I would realize, I would notice that I started as a software developer. I worked in Canada. I've worked in the United States as well. But sometimes when I would be run into problems, for example, while I was working, whatever, if I needed help, the kind of help that I would get would start at a much more basic level. So like if I asked help from a coworker or whatever, he would ask me things like, did you restart your computer? Just stuff that was super basic that they would never dream to ask another male, and I was kind of like, really, you're asking me this, and I thought it was just me, but I had mentioned it to another female colleague once and she was like, oh yeah, totally. That's how, and so just things like that, so
that's very understandable. It's common and I can relate to that. So how do you handle, either back then or now, how do you handle biases or stereotypes related to your ethnicity?
I think I was fortunate in the sense that in Canada, I worked with very many different ethnicities. It was, and so everybody was sort of the same in that we were all different. Oh. So at least at the beginning of my career, what more stood out was that I was a woman, not that I was Filipino or different, because I worked with all kinds of different nationalities as well. Okay. So then when my husband and I moved our family to the United States and the Midwest, then I noticed that, I wasn't just working with mostly male, I was also working with mostly white male. That was the difference. Yeah. But even then, I find working in the engineering sector, what I needed to do was be competent, right? And that more than anything was it. Like if they could respect you for the work that you did, then it didn't matter that I was female or that I was like Filipino or that, I had black hair and everybody else was blonde, that kind of thing. Right. Maybe more than anything, it was a cultural, there were some cultural things. Like, for example, as a Filipino Asian, I was raised in, we're kind of a little bit more quiet. We don't, if you question your elders or then it's a sign of disrespect. Things like that. And so those were kind of more like the things I had to overcome. Like I had to learn to speak up. right?
Yeah,
exactly.
right.
Exactly.
Okay, so what, and this is clearly you have to speak in basic English because I'm about to ask you a tech question. What programming languages or technologies that are most passionate for you?
Wow. Being in aerospace, a lot of the programming languages that we use are like the classic ones, you know.
Okay.
So I've worked a lot with C.
Okay.
We work a lot with Python.
Oh, okay.
So it really, I guess it depends from sector to sector, company to company. So I did, my degree was in computer science. So in a way, I'm programming agnostic in the sense that I can learn a different language depending on what's needed. So we've done, you know, different scripting languages, different languages. So, but yeah.
Is that, was that challenging to work with being like one of the only few women, or is it something because it's a technology? I'm still thinking heavily male dominated area. Did you see more challenges, less challenges because you were in that certain sector of technology, that programming sector?
Yeah. The learning in a way, we all kind of knew how to program, right? So it was maybe more like I had mentioned at the beginning, where like when you would run into like problems when you're debugging, then like they would start at a lower level, like you didn't know, that kind of thing, you know. Okay. But keeping up with it or learning something new, that was something that, I mean, I don't know how males learn, but you know, like it was like I could keep up. You know.
And you like it, and you're good with it.
I enjoy it.
You enjoy it?
It is good. It is good. I took a break between for a few years while my son was in middle school and high school, so that I could be with him and be more active and volunteer. And that's how I met you. So I during that time I didn't. In a way, I didn't miss it because I was busy doing other things. You know, so I was busy being present at school. I was volunteering at church, things like that.
Now, did you feel supported when you did go back into the work industry, or was it a little challenging?
I noticed that, well, support, yes, in a way. I mean, my husband was he was all for it. Like he was, you know, he supported me that way. And then job hunting, of course, that, you know, and what I did notice is that I started working again about a year and a half ago. And I noticed what a big difference there is now in terms of like how many females I work with. In fact, I'm working in a team. One of my projects, we are all female, which would never, I've never seen that before.
Oh, great.
So that those are different. Although when I was applying for my job, I noticed that really most of the people who interviewed me were male. I had only a few females, and this has always been the case. Usually before, only human resources would be female who would interview me, and this time I had some engineers as well, but really still the majority was male, and many middle-aged white type males. So.
Okay, so you guys heard from Maria. It's not just statistics; it's real. So, have you ever worked on any exciting projects that you like to share? Anything exciting?
I don't know about exciting.
It's so funny because working in aerospace, you know, I could, you know, say, oh, yeah, I worked on the plane CF, blah, 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 or the engine, blah, 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 and this. But the common person would like, huh?
Yeah.
What?
At the beginning of my career, I worked for a flight simulator company. And it was not just like your little Microsoft flight simulator thing. It was like an actual full flight simulator. Wow. So at the late 90s, early 2000s, that was like really exciting. And so, you know, it looked like you were in a cockpit. And they would actually use those simulators to train pilots. They would get their hours of training in those simulators. So that's kind of, I guess, you know.
That is very good. Let's see. Have you ever encountered any cultural differences while collaborating with your teams? When I say cultural differences, like you mentioned working in Canada versus working in the United States. I'm I'm sure there are different cultures in the workplace. Like you said, some places you have to be a little bit more extroverted, and your culture at home is probably a little more introverted. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but
right, yes, yeah, it is true. I think also the even like the work culture is different. I find like people who work in teaching or in medicine or whatever, like engineers have their own culture almost, as well. And so I think maybe it has something to do with like it being so male dominated. It's very, so it's very business, like, and it's harder to get to know your coworkers because it's just different. Like, it's not just males, it's also male engineers, right?
Male engineers.
So, but yeah, culturally, like, it's, I don't know if I don't want to speak for all Asians, but we're a little bit more reserved, a little bit laid back.
Right.
So like myself, I would only speak when I was sure of something. Like, it's not that I never made mistakes, but I really, really, really like wanted to make sure that when something came out of my mouth, it was
needed.
And I did find like, working in Canada, we were, like I said, a lot more mixed in terms of ethnicities. In the Midwest, it was different. And so I had to find ways to communicate and to find common ground.
So are you saying Canada's culture was a little bit more supportive of your transitioning from your home culture to the work culture than it is in the States?
I don't know if it was like consciously supportive. Maybe it was like I said, we were all different. We were the same in that we were different. And so everybody was very like much more open to learning about others, like and sharing. I think that's a thing too, right? Like it's two parts of it that that they're willing to reciprocate as well.
I never knew that.
Yeah.
So I guess I'll be more open-minded about Canada. What advice would you give to other Filipino women or just women of color aspiring to work in tech industry?
I would say, have confidence in yourself. Don't be discouraged by, if you're learning, you're going to school. Don't be discouraged if you go into a classroom and you don't see as many, women, as many Filipinos. It doesn't mean that you can't do it. Like, I never thought about it myself. Like I was just there. I went in and did it. It was like for myself that I did it. So I would say, don't be discouraged and be confident. And when you enter the workforce, remember that, you went to school for this, you did well in it. Be confident that you have something to share, that you have something to contribute.
Yeah. Did you guys hear that? Be confident. Be assured that you do have value to add. So, okay, what steps can an organization or company take to create a more inclusive and supportive environment for women of color in the tech industry?
I found in my current company, I think that the world has come a long way from when I started 20 years ago. Like there's just much more awareness. There are, in my company, there's a lot of groups that, groups for women, groups for, different ethnicities to share, to even how to to grow your network of contacts within the company, that sort of thing. And so, meeting like-minded people, meeting, people who can understand you. There's just a lot more of that. And I find even in general, the managers and everybody I've worked with has been, I think, just very supportive in general of everyone. Not just like, oh, you're a woman, oh, you're Asian, I'm going to be extra nice to you. Not like that. Just like, to everybody that you work with. And I think it's just human respect, right?
Human respect.
Boils down to that, right? Like, I don't want special treatment.
Right? Yeah.
So
that's great that you say that, because if more companies can see their employees as humans and respect them as humans versus, I guess, a quota that need to be managed.
Yes.
then they would probably, achieve their objectives and goals a lot more.
Right.
So can you speak on, let's see, some of those successes that you've had that if you think about it now, how could you say that you've navigated some of those challenges to be where you are today? Because, did you have a supportive home environment that said, you can do this? Or was it that you just had this, I can do it myself?
I think it's just, I don't know that my parents were necessarily conscious of, oh, we're different. Oh, I think they were just always do your work well, go out there, treat people respectfully. So I just always lived my life that way. Like I went to school and I did my work well and I treated people respect. You know what I mean? And that I think that was great support, even if my parents weren't necessarily like cheering me on, saying, "Oh, you're a woman." That was never the case.
Oh, really?
And it's funny because I look back and I had, when I was in university at McGill, I had one professor who was female, and she had asked me if I wanted to do a master's with her. And at the time I was concerned about getting a job. And so I had declined it. And I was talking with my son, who's now studying to be an engineer. And I was thinking I could have been one of those women in tech, you know what I mean? Like just at the beginning, like one of those pioneers, and I just I just didn't even realize what I was in, and I think it was just this mentality that I grew up with, that you go out there, you do it. And I didn't think that, okay, I'm like, a minority, I'm at this. It was just, I'm studying this, I'm going to get a job. And
I'm just going to do it.
Exactly.
I'm just going to do it.
I think
so. That is some bravery, people. That's Maria performing her brown bravery, saying, I'm just going to do it.
Without knowing that I was being brave. Like, I just didn't even know that it was anything. It wasn't.
Sometimes we have it. And some of us aren't that brave. And so can you speak to some, I don't know what part of my book that captured your attention that you can speak on for some of those Marias and Michelles out there who are just not that brave. What suggestions can you give them, or tips or advice, other than, we've already shared with them, be confident, but just on a daily basis, being at work, being around a bunch of others where you're the only or one of a few, what suggestions can you have them take on a daily basis?
I think in the workplace, especially here in the States, I've noticed that the work culture is very, you go to work, you work, and then you go and you're done. And I think that maybe to varying degrees in different companies, whatever. And of course, it's also a little bit different now that there's the option of working from home, remotely. But I do think that it helps a lot when you are comfortable with the people that you're working with. And I think that it pays off to spend a little bit of time making that connection with the people around you.
Connection.
Yeah. Like, I think, not just what's the next deliverable, what's the next problem that we have to solve, but, how are you? How is your, that sort of thing. Right. And I think that people, whatever cultural background or nationality they have, whether they're male, female, I think that when they can be seen as a person, I think that makes a difference.
So in my book, I speak on that. I speak on, communication and connection. And I've also, many of my other forms of awareness, I've shared that, many of you listeners and viewers who are not a woman of color, how you can better communicate to women of color. There are certain ways that you can position yourself when you're speaking to her. Because she's not the norm and not in the majority, she's already feeling, taxed and stressed. And she's coming from an environment at home that is slightly different, because mine was slightly different at home. And then when I would go in a workplace, I would have to switch. You've heard the phrase code switch, right? Mm-hmm. We have to switch to the predominantly majority culture. So it's we're already taxed at the beginning coming into the workforce. So one of the things that many of you can do to help better outcomes at your organization is to be mindful of your body positioning when you're talking to a woman of color. When you're speaking to her, please do not put your hands on your temple when you're talking to her, that signals to her that her information is not really wanted. Don't turn your back to her when you're talking to a group that she's in. Don't only face them and turn your back to her. When you're speaking to her, don't speak to her only from your head and only from your mouth. Speak mainly from your heart, because when you speak from your head, sometimes you'll say things that some words may come across as curt or unprofessional. And if you speak only from your mouth, some of those words may land differently in her ear. When you're inviting people out for after hours or social events, make sure to invite her personally.
And it's interesting that you point all that out, right? And as you were saying it, I was thinking that's a way to talk to everybody.
To everybody.
Right? As a sign of respect, right? Because it's just a decent thing to do.
A decent thing to do.
And it reminds me a little bit of one of the things when I was working in about a bit more than 10 years ago at another company, but it was in the Midwest. And like I had mentioned at the beginning, it was a more white male dominated, very little ethnicity, and trying to find common ground with them. And aside from the, asking a little bit, like starting a conversation with, hi, how are you? Instead of just going down to business right away.
Right away.
I had started a little sign-up group where people could tell me their birthday, and then we would all go out together to celebrate.
Yeah.
And I think that, even after I left that company, they continued it.
Great.
And so it was just
small things like that.
And then, you would go out and have lunch together instead of eating at your desk, and then the person who had a birthday would feel special because they had, and then sometimes I would bake a cake and bring that and that sort of thing. Right.
Yes.
And whatever nationality you are, like, who doesn't like cake, right? Everybody comes, everybody eats, has cake, they talk, and it's just, then you share a little bit more about yourself. Right?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Maria. So we're ending our session here, and Maria, I'm going to, I like to end my sessions by asking a burst of fun questions.
Oh, okay.
So, do you like Oreo cookies?
I do.
And so, listeners and viewers, I brought a pack of Oreos. But, Maria, my next question is, what's your favorite flavor?
Ooh, I think like chocolate.
Chocolate Oreos?
Yes.
Okay, with the chocolate cream?
Yes.
If you could create your own flavor, what would it be?
Oh, my goodness. I don't know. I think, my son really likes s'mores. So maybe like a s'more, although it's kind of very similar already to the classic Oreo.
Yeah.
There could be like a little bit of extra chocolate in there.
Extra chocolate. I think they have a flavor out there. That's
do they
s'mores.
Already? Okay.
I think so.
They probably do.
Yeah.
That's kind of popular.
I have a fondness for Oreos for personal reasons. So, but thank you, Maria, for joining me today. And listeners and viewers, I'd like to pose a challenge to you. Look around your organization, your company, and your department, and see if any of your team members are a woman of color. And if so, do you actually see her for who she is? Did you acknowledge her by smiling, waving, or speaking to her? And did you act on or echo any of her comments? And did you mentor or sponsor her when she's not in the room. If you counted less than 20% of your total women of color in your department, organization, or team, then it's okay, but you have an opportunity to be more brown brave. So until next time, people, have fun and eat more Oreos. Thank you. Thanks, Maria.
Thanks, Michelle.